Hello everyone, Thunderbro here, back with another character focus. The kinda flying but not really creepy-faced ninja, Jiraia. Jiraia is a rather difficult character to completely understand. He's around for such a short amount of time, but his actions and supposed motivations tackle some of Gintama's core themes. To understand Jiraia, we have to start at the beginning. We know that he's an extremely skilled ninja born with the name Tobita Danzo and Iga during a time where factions were warring with one another. Seeing how much of a prodigy Danzo was struck fear into the opposing factions, and all of his family got wiped out except for him and his sister, who was held hostage so they could ensure Danzo didn't rebel. His sister couldn't bear seeing Danzo subjugated and suffering, so she killed herself to free Danzo of the supposed burden of being forced into serving the faction that killed his family. After that, he worked for the shogunate as a member of the Oniwaban faithfully until disagreements over taking action against the Tendosho, as well as the Oniwaban's own fear over Jiraiya's skills and psychological instability, forced Jiraia into fleeing, after being double-crossed by Zenzo's father and other members of the Oniwaban, where he stayed on the run under many different faces and aliases until finding himself in Yoshiwara. So it's clear that these two experiences with the Iga Civil War and the Bakufu betrayal shaped Jiraiya's harsh and twisted ideology in regards to forging bonds and partnerships. He was manipulated for many years because his sister was held hostage, and the only other people who he could at least call comrades cast him aside when their political opinions were no longer aligned, and when they feared him. Now in Gintama, this kind of thing is nothing new. The world of Gintama is a relentless one where having a close friendship or bond with someone is just as much a serious weakness as it can be a strength. Look at what happened to the Joey 4 with Shoyo, or Isaburo with his wife. These kinds of things are exploited in Gintama constantly for certain characters to get an advantage over another. But instead of forging new bonds like Gintoki, Katsura, and Isaburo, Jiraia gave up on it and believed one should only serve themselves and ensure their own survival over all else. Now this is where Tsukuyo comes in. When Jiraia ran into a young Tsukuyo at Yoshiwara, he formed a student-teacher relationship with her, potentially after seeing remnants of himself in Tsukuyo, who wanted to protect Hinoa and Yoshiwara all by herself, and asked Jiraia for help. A young person having so much self-inflicted burden on them probably reminded him of his time as the hope of the Tobita faction and how that ended up getting his entire family killed. What seemed to be your standard master-student training was actually a plan by Jiraia to not allow Tsukuyo to run into the same pitfalls as he did, and not to blindly devote herself to people or rely on people. Since his own experience with devotion and bonds was so detrimental for him, he was determined to teach Tsukuyo that bonds and partnerships are all a hindrance to one's own survival, with the pinnacle of that plan being his own fake death during a fire in Yoshiwara so Tsukuyo wouldn't have anyone to rely on. But Jiraia failed to take into account two things. Hinoa and Yoshiwara would survive and Tsukuyo still had those people to protect, and the fact that Hosen would take over the district, giving Tsukuyo all the more reason to protect the entire place. She not only tried to support Hinoa, but she enlisted prostitutes caught trying to escape into the Hyaka rather than putting them to death as is the expectation. Jiraiya's training helped her stay alive, but it also allowed Tsukuyo to have the conviction to protect the bonds that she had formed. So after Hosen was killed, Jiraia took his opportunity to try and set things straight and make sure his original plans are enacted. Yoshiwara's weak security after the fall of Hosen allowed Jiraia to enter the district unnoticed with the Benigamoto crime syndicate, which publicly tried to front as a Joey Shishi organization. Jiraia knew that Tsukuyo had formed bonds with the people of Yoshiwara as well as the members of the Yorazuya, so along with sending Yoshiwara into disarray with his drug dealing, he was probably planning to lure Tsukuyo and her new friends over to him so he can finish the job and make sure Tsukuyo relies on nobody. So why would Jiraia go to such extreme lengths to ensure Tsukuyo truly learns that lesson? Well, it's also pretty selfish and somewhat tragic. For Jiraia, Tsukuyo was the last person left in his entire life with any sort of meaning to him. His family and his old masters and comrades were either dead or completely out of his life, and when he saw that Tsukuyo was trying to embrace the very life that ended up breaking him, he feared the same fate would befall her. So even if he had to make Tsukuyo suffer and become her mortal enemy, he would do everything to keep her away from the same path he took. He was essentially serving his own ends by any means necessary, just as much as he was supposedly trying to help Tsukuyo. But his ideology falls flat in regards to trying to take everything away from Tsukuyo. I think he leans far more towards the side of serving himself rather than helping Tsukuyo, because he doesn't want to lose anyone again. Even if he had to break Tsukuyo herself, he convinced himself that it would keep her alive and prevent the grief of losing another bond. But although you can argue doing these things to ensure Tsukuyo's survival is a sign of devotion, but it's also ignorant of Tsukuyo's perspective. I say he serves himself more because he doesn't care about how Tsukuyo feels. He wants to make sure she lives so he can have the satisfaction of not losing her, even if he ruins her life in the process. And there's no way he can predict how Tsukuyo would react to losing everything. Not everyone is like Jiraia. Tsukuyo could have withdrawn into psychological illness, became a crazed murderer, or caused self-harm over the stress of the events. If his plans were ever successful, would Tsukuyo truly be alive? Not just physically, but in spirit. Is he really protecting Tsukuyo by causing these traumas to her? He has no idea how she could potentially react, and he takes a big gamble with her life and her mental state so he can guarantee he won't suffer again. Jiraiya's life was terrible, and nobody deserves the horrible things that happened to him. But that does not give him license to ruin somebody else's life and damage them permanently. Gintoki was absolutely justified in being angry at Jiraiya, claiming that nobody who makes their own students suffer deserves to be a master of anyone. Jiraiya claims to want Sukuyo to be strong and independent, but his methods including doing the same things that people had done to him when he was growing up, and that makes him no better than any of the people that he was betrayed by. Instead of rising above the betrayals that shaped his life, he let them consume him, and he attempted to avoid a repeat of these events almost entirely at Sukuyo's expense. This is why Jiraiya, in my opinion, is one of the more reprehensible villains in Gintama, despite his tragic backstory and complex motivations. He is a tragic figure, but that doesn't make him justified, and although right before his death he admitted that he was acting more in self-interest and apologized to Sukuyo, it doesn't forgive what he tried to do, but in my mind it confirmed without doubt that he was selfish. So that's my video on Jiraia. I hope it was interesting. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'm interested to read your opinions. Follow me on Twitter if you like my content enough. Thanks and take care.